Today we're doing something diabolical and wrapping the hood of a Model Y Juniper in PPF, but both one side in dry and the other side in wet install. So let's go and do this experiment. So dry install color PPF has come out in the last couple of years, and a lot of other manufacturers have done that. 3M came out with their PWF, and Avery Dennison is coming out with their Prisma Pro. They're both dry apply color PPF, and what that means, it's polyurethane, it's TPU based, and it has the protection layer, and you can also change the color of your vehicle, but it is not a traditional wet install. So what I mean by a wet install is typically you use something called a slip solution, which is basically like a soapy solution, and you put it, you could slide it around, and then basically you can install it with this kind of squeegee right here. On the other hand, on the dry, it's similar to a vinyl install, which means that you don't use any solution, but instead you actually just use a squeegee like this. You do still use soapy solution on the outer surface, but just as a lubricant. There's nothing underneath it. There's going to be pros and cons. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to be installing first the dry on this side, and then we're going to do the right side, which is also for wet install. But we're going to split the screen since we have this camera right here, and we're going to play back the exact same time. I want to disclose that typically when you are doing a dry apply color PPF, you typically don't use patterns. You bulk it just like vinyl, right? So basically you get like a sheet, and then you squeegee your way out, and then you have to cut it. But since I actually have a template on the Model Y Juniper, I didn't want to do like one in a different pattern. So I have a pattern of the wet install, and I just cut the exact same pattern on the other side using dry install. So I just want to disclose that normally this is not how it's done. I would have used a sheet, but I just want to make it very, very clear. I just wanted to make the experimentation as accurate as possible between the two. So enough talking, let's get wrapping. All right, so it's not necessarily about speed, but I am going to try to do it because I think time is of essence right here. So this right here is perfect. This right here is perfect. Installation isn't the same like traditional vinyl. You're actually going to be how do you say this? You're not glassing it out. You kind of want to keep it the least amount, and then just kind of work this panel section by section. And when you have a bubble like this, don't try to just air release it out. Honestly, you just want to kind of use some nice even stroke, and then we can work our way here. And you notice I actually have this lubricant. I'm just going to work my way up. Okay. All right, so now that we have kind of like the four corners tacked, this is the fun part. You get to squeegee everything out. Okay, I'm gonna just start from the top. The motion is very different. I consider like PPF motion to be a little bit more like stabby and smaller. You're kind of watching where the water is traveling. Like I said, it's a very different type of product. It's not like if you're coming from vinyl, it'll be an easier adaptation. You come from PPF, it's gonna be a different, right? You see how I'm just kind of creating, like holding this out like this. I'm not letting it like fall. I'm actually holding the liner. Now things are speeding up right here. Boom. So this whole video is about doing the whole hood. I'm not trying to just skimp out and then just do that and say that's done, because we're not done yet. So now I'm gonna go ahead and get a microfiber and kind of look at it. And you can see right here, got no bubbles. I think the question of what's better is not the right question to ask. I think it's more of like the audience and who you are, right? If you're a vinyl installer and you want to get into PPF, this is like an obvious, not upgrade, but like something you can offer to your customers. We're gonna go ahead and use some heat. So I think one of the easier parts about this is that we can wrap the edges almost immediately. And this particular dry PPF has a really good grab. So you can see, just make sure that all your edges are solid. And you can just use a wrap glove and just start rolling your fingers around. But there, we're done. First off, you have to use the torch as well on a wet install. And you kind of want to burn this corner, usually on the edges. And what you're doing is when you burn, it basically kills the memory almost instantly, and then it does not come back. So I'm going to do the same thing right here. I'm going to give it a little touch. That's all you need. Just a touch. And now the corner is molded in. This corner is good, and time off. So that is the installation of dry apply color PPF. And then we have the wet install, which is a traditional color PPF method. They both have, again, I'm not trying to answer what is better. I think it's more of a question of where you come from and where your background is. Again, if you're a vinyl installer, this is going to be a lot easier to understand, I think. I can compare this a little bit more to the chrome. When you're installing chrome, you have to be very careful. It's a little sensitive. You don't necessarily glass everything out and start squeegeeing. Air release is definitely different from a SW900 or 2080. Definitely not as forgiving as SW900 because it is much thicker. On the other hand, the pros here is that it is positionable. You can actually move it around. The other downside to this is that it takes a little bit longer for the edges to dry out. And a lot of times, if you don't seal your edges properly, bubbles can kind of show up on the edges. So you just need to make sure you use, tack solution or your water, distilled water or warm water, to kind of flush that all out to ensure that you have a good install on the edges. So I think in terms of like the pros here is like, it's just like you can do the edges almost immediately. This one just takes a little bit more time. But again, I think the experience is going to matter the most in terms of like, if you're doing PPF all day, this is going to come a lot more naturally. This is going to feel really weird because you're going to vinyl. But if you're a vinyl, this is going to feel really natural for you. There's going to be a little bit adjustments like using, tack reducer. And then on top of that, you also want to use a wet buffer compared to just a dry buffer. And then of course you want to kind of release, kind of make sure there's very little tension and then you're kind of like working your way through. And that's typically how you do it. So hopefully this kind of covered a little bit of the install methods and the differences between the two. They both have really good usage. They both have very, very similar thickness and also the same warranty. So I don't think you can go wrong either way. There's a lot of brands. This one in particular we were using is the Avery Dennison Prisma Pro. This is their dry apply color PPF, and this is our boring PPF. I forget, this is forest green, I believe. But they're all very, very similar in terms of install for wet. So hopefully this video helps you understand the two different techniques. If you have any questions, let us know in the comments below. Make sure you click on that subscribe button, and happy wrapping.